For context, I live in a row of townhouses in a decent neighborhood just outside of Philadelphia. Each unit has one designated parking spot directly in front of the house, with additional street parking available on a first-come, first-served basis. My wife and I both work from home most days, so we only have one car between us, which means our designated spot is really all we need. The problem started about 6 months ago when a new family moved in next door. They seemed nice enough at first, a couple with 2 teenage kids. The first week, I introduced myself and welcomed them to the neighborhood. The conversation was pleasant, but I noticed the husband kept glancing at my parking spot with an odd expression. I didn't think much of it at the time. A few days later, I went out to grab some groceries. When I returned 30 minutes later, their car was in my spot. I figured it was an honest mistake, maybe they didn't understand the parking situation yet. So I knocked on their door to explain. The wife answered. "Oh, hi there," she said cheerfully, like there was nothing wrong. "Hey, I noticed your car is in my assigned spot," I said, trying to keep my tone friendly. "Just wanted to let you know that each house has its own designated spot directly in front of it." Her smile faded. "Oh, we know. My husband just parked there because it's closer to our door than our own spot. We have 2 cars, you know, but we'll move it when you need to use it." I was a bit taken aback. "Well, I need to use it now. I just got back from the store and have groceries to bring in." She sighed dramatically. "Really? Can't you just park in our spot for now? My husband is on a work call and really doesn't want to be disturbed." I stood my ground. "I'd rather use my own spot, please." After some more passive-aggressive sighing, she finally called her husband to move their car. He came out looking annoyed, muttering something under his breath as he got into his luxury SUV and backed it out of my spot. I thought that would be the end of it. Boy, was I wrong? The very next day, I went out for a morning coffee run. When I returned 15 minutes later, their car was in my spot again. This time, I was less polite when I knocked on their door. The husband answered. "Look, man, I explained this yesterday," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "That's my assigned parking spot." He leaned against the doorframe with a smirk. "Yeah, but we have 2 cars and only one spot. You're gone all the time anyway. What's the big deal?" "The big deal is that it's my spot," I replied. "I pay for it as part of my HOA fees. If you need another spot, you can park on the street or talk to the HOA about additional parking options." He rolled his eyes. "Whatever, dude. I'll move it this time. But seriously, you should learn to share. It's what neighbors do." This pattern continued for weeks. Every time I'd leave, even for just a few minutes, I'd return to find their car in my spot. I tried talking to them reasonably. I left notes on their car. I even printed out a copy of the HOA parking regulations and taped it to their door. Nothing worked. When I finally reached out to our HOA, I was surprised by how unhelpful they were. "Unfortunately, sir, we don't have the resources to enforce parking regulations on a daily basis," the HOA manager told me over the phone. "We suggest you try to work it out with your neighbor amicably." "I've tried being amicable," I explained. "They just keep doing it." "Well, technically, you could have them towed, but you'd have to call the towing company yourself. And honestly, that might just escalate the situation with your neighbor." I considered the towing option, but I knew she was right. It would only make things worse, and I still had to live next to these people. Plus, by the time a tow truck arrived, they might have already moved their car. I was venting about all this to my buddy Mike over beers one Friday night. He works in construction management and has a practical mind for solving problems. "You know what you need?" he said after hearing my tale of woe. "You need to fill that spot when you're not using it. Something big enough that they can't move it, but temporary enough that you're not technically violating any HOA rules yourself." "Like what?" I asked. "A team of bodyguards to stand in the spot all day?" He laughed. "No, something simpler." "What about a dumpster?" I nearly spit out my beer. "A dumpster? Are you serious?" "Yeah, think about it. You can rent those things. They're big enough to fill a parking spot, and they're heavy as hell so your neighbor can't move it. Plus, you can tell the HOA you're doing some home renovations if they ask." The more I thought about it, the more brilliant it seemed. But I didn't want to rent a dumpster. That would get expensive over time. So I did something even better. I found a used dumpster for sale online from a construction company that was upgrading their equipment. The next Monday, I took a half-day off work and drove out to the construction company's yard. There it was, a beautiful, 4-yard dumpster painted dark green. It wasn't pretty, but it was mine for $1,200. The company even agreed to deliver it to my house that afternoon when I knew both my neighbors would be at work. When the delivery truck arrived, I directed them to place the dumpster perfectly centered in my parking spot. The driver gave me a curious look but didn't ask questions. By the time my neighbors got home from work, there was a massive dumpster sitting squarely in my parking spot, with my car parked on the street. The husband pulled up and did a double take. He parked in his own spot, got out, and immediately marched over to where I was pretending to check my mail. "What the hell is that?" he demanded, pointing at the dumpster. I looked up innocently. "Oh, that? It's a dumpster. I can see that," he snapped. "Why is it in your parking spot?" I shrugged. "I'm doing some renovations. Going to be a few weeks, maybe longer." His face turned an impressive shade of red. "Where am I supposed to park my second car now?" "Gee, I don't know," I said thoughtfully. "Maybe on the street, like everyone else who has more than one car." He stood there sputtering for a moment before storming off to his house. The next morning, I found a note taped to the dumpster. "Move this eyesore immediately or I'm calling the HOA." I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. Now he was the one leaving notes. Sure enough, later that day I got a call from the HOA manager. "Mr. Thompson from next door has filed a complaint about a dumpster in your parking spot," she said. "He says it's an eyesore and against HOA regulations." "I checked the HOA bylaws carefully," I replied. "There's nothing prohibiting the temporary placement of a dumpster on your own property for renovation purposes." "Well, how long will it be there?" she asked. "Hard to say," I said vaguely. "Renovations, you know how they go. Could be weeks, could be months." She sighed. "Look, I understand you're frustrated about the parking situation. Mr. Thompson mentioned that as well." "Oh, did he?" I replied, trying to sound surprised. "Did he happen to mention that he's been parking in my spot without permission for months despite multiple requests to stop?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "He mentioned there was some confusion about the parking arrangements." "There's no confusion. He knows it's my spot, and he parks there anyway because it's more convenient for him. I've asked him nicely dozens of times to stop." Another pause. "I see. Well, technically, you are within your rights to place a dumpster in your own parking spot, as long as it doesn't block anyone else's space or the roadway." "It doesn't," I assured her. "It fits perfectly in my spot." After she hung up, I felt a small sense of victory. The dumpster stayed, and for the first time in months, I didn't have to worry about someone stealing my parking spot. The neighbors, predictably, were furious. They tried various tactics to get me to remove it. First, they started making loud comments whenever they saw me outside. Things like, "Some people have no consideration for property values and this used to be such a nice-looking neighborhood." When that didn't work, they escalated to leaving passive-aggressive notes on my door about how the dumpster was an eyesore and attracting vermin. It wasn't, it was empty and clean. Next came the direct confrontation. The wife knocked on my door one evening, putting on her sweetest voice and most reasonable tone. "We understand you were upset about the parking situation," she said, "but don't you think this has gone on long enough? That dumpster is really bringing down the look of the neighborhood." "I'm not done with my renovations yet," I replied calmly. "What renovations?" she challenged. "We haven't seen any construction vehicles or heard any work being done." I smiled. "I'm doing it myself, a little at a time. I'm in no rush." She dropped the sweet act. "Look, this is ridiculous. You're only doing this to be spiteful." "No more spiteful than repeatedly parking in someone else's assigned spot after being asked dozens of times not to," I pointed out. She huffed and stormed away, and I closed my door, feeling that same small sense of victory. But things took an unexpected turn the following week. I came home from work to find my dumpster had been spray-painted with the word J.A. Irk in large red letters on the side facing their house. Now they had crossed the line from annoying to vandalism. I immediately called the police to report it and took plenty of pictures for evidence. The responding officer wasn't too concerned about the vandalism itself. "It's just a dumpster, sir," but he did take a report and said he'd talk to the neighbors. I didn't hear what was said during that conversation, but later that night, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. "This is your neighbor. The cop says I have to pay to clean your stupid dumpster. This is harassment and I'll be contacting my lawyer." I didn't respond. Instead, I installed a small security camera on my porch, aimed directly at my parking spot in the dumpster. If they were going to escalate, I wanted evidence. The next morning, I found a business card in my mailbox for a parking enforcement company, with "Call US to tow illegal dumpsters" written on the back in what was clearly my neighbor's handwriting. I added it to my growing collection of evidence of their harassment. For the next few days, things were quiet, suspiciously quiet. Then one afternoon, I got an alert from my security camera. I checked the footage to see the husband circling my dumpster with a tape measure, taking photos, and making notes. What was he up to? I found out the next day when I received a certified letter from a lawyer representing my neighbors. The letter claimed that my dumpster was encroaching on their property by 3.5 inches and demanded its immediate removal. I took the letter to my buddy Mike, who recommended his company's lawyer. After reviewing the HOA documents, property lines, and parking spot dimensions, the lawyer assured me that my dumpster was entirely within my assigned space. He drafted a response to my neighbor's lawyer stating as much and warning them that further harassment could result in legal action against them. 2 days later, I came home to find a notice from the city taped to my dumpster, claiming it violated some obscure municipal code and had to be removed within 48 hours. I immediately called the city office, and after being transferred multiple times, finally reached someone who could help. "Let me check on this notice," the city employee said after I explained the situation. After a few minutes of keyboard clicking, she came back on the line. "Sir, our records don't show any such violation or notice being issued for your address." "So this notice is fake?" I asked, although I already knew the answer. "It appears so. That's actually a crime, impersonating a city official." I thanked her, hung up, and checked my security footage. Sure enough, there was my neighbor, in broad daylight, taping the fake notice to my dumpster. I called the police again and showed them the footage when they arrived. This time, they took it more seriously. Impersonating a government official is no small offense. They went next door, and I could hear raised voices from inside the neighbor's house. Eventually, an officer came back to inform me they'd be following up with possible charges and advised me to continue documenting any further incidents. The next day was Saturday, and I was surprised to see a different officer at my door around 10 a.m. Apparently, my neighbors had filed a complaint claiming I was harassing them by putting the dumpster in my spot just to spite them and by constantly calling the police on them for no reason. I showed the officer my documentation of the entire saga, the HOA rules about assigned parking spots, my text messages and emails asking them to stop parking in my spot, the photos of their car in my spot on multiple occasions, the security footage of the vandalism and the fake city notice, and the lawyer's letter confirming my dumpster was legally placed. The officer reviewed everything and shook his head. "Some people just can't stand losing, can they?" he remarked. "Don't worry, I'll set the record straight in my report." After about 2 weeks of this back and forth, something unexpected happened. I came home from work to find a moving truck parked in front of my neighbor's house. They were moving out. I couldn't believe it. Had my dumpster revenge actually driven them away? As I was bringing in my groceries, the husband approached me, looking less arrogant than usual. "We're moving," he stated flatly. "I can see that," I replied, trying to keep the satisfaction out of my voice. He shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I know we got off on the wrong foot with the parking thing. I shouldn't have kept using your spot." I was stunned by this sudden admission. "What changed your mind?" He sighed. "The company I work for is downsizing, and I got laid off last month. We can't afford this place anymore, so we're moving in with my in-laws until I find something new." I felt a twinge of guilt. Had I been fighting with a man who was already dealing with losing his job? But then he continued, "Anyway, now that we're moving, you can get rid of that eyesore of a dumpster. We already told the HOA you were just doing it to be difficult." And just like that, my sympathy evaporated. Even when admitting he was wrong, he couldn't help but take a parting shot. "Actually," I said, "I think I'll keep it a while longer. You never know when a dumpster might come in handy." He glared at me before walking away, muttering something under his breath. The next day, the moving truck was gone, and so were my problematic neighbors. I kept the dumpster in place for another week, just to make sure they didn't try to come back or cause any more trouble. When I was confident they were truly gone, I arranged to have it moved to my backyard. About a month later, a new family moved in next door, a quiet couple with a small child. The first time I saw them struggling with groceries, I offered to help. As we chatted, the topic of parking came up. "We noticed you have that dumpster in your backyard," the husband mentioned. "Are you doing renovations?" I smiled. "That dumpster has an interesting story, actually. Let's just say it taught me that sometimes the best way to deal with entitled people is to give them exactly what they deserve. No more, no less." They looked confused, but I just laughed. "Don't worry, I'm happy to share my parking spot if you ever need it. All you have to do is ask nicely." And that's how I went from being the neighborhood pushover to the guy with the legendary dumpster revenge story. My buddy Mike says I should paint it and turn it into a planter or something useful, but I kind of like having it as a reminder that standing up for yourself sometimes requires creativity, and occasionally, a $1,200 investment in a used dumpster. Was I petty? Maybe. Was it worth it? Absolutely. Some lessons cost more than others, but this one paid for itself in satisfaction alone. And before you ask, yes, I still have the dumpster. You never know when you might need it again. Update, 6 months later. It's been about 6 months since my entitled neighbors moved out, and I figured you all might want to know what happened with the dumpster situation and the aftermath. A lot has changed, and let's just say karma has a way of circling back around. After the neighbors left, I kept the dumpster in my backyard as I mentioned before. I wasn't really sure what to do with it, but I didn't want to sell it right away in case I needed it again. The new neighbors who moved in next door turned out to be genuinely nice people, a stark contrast to the entitled family that had left. We quickly developed a friendly relationship, and they even brought us a homemade pie as a welcome gift, though technically, we should have been welcoming them. About 2 weeks after they moved in, I was doing yard work when the husband, let's call him Dan, came over to chat. After some small talk, he mentioned something interesting. "You know, when we were looking at this house, the real estate agent told us a weird story about the previous owners," he said. Something about them being forced to move because of a nasty dispute with their neighbors over a dumpster. I'm guessing that was you? I laughed and admitted it was, though I wouldn't say I forced them to move. The husband lost his job, and they couldn't afford the place anymore. Dan nodded. That's part of the story, but not all of it. According to our agent, they were actually planning to sell the place anyway because they'd found a bigger house in a more upscale neighborhood. But then the husband got laid off, and they were stuck with 2 mortgages they couldn't afford. That's why they were so desperate to move out quickly. Huh, I said, genuinely surprised. They never mentioned anything about buying another house. From what I gather, they were trying to keep it quiet until the sale went through. The agent said they'd already put down a non-refundable deposit on the new place when he lost his job. That's why they ended up having to move in with the in-laws instead. This new information made me see the whole situation in a different light. It wasn't just about a parking spot. They were planning to leave all along. The husband's job loss just accelerated their timeline and put them in a financial bind. No wonder they were so angry about the dumpster. It was probably the last straw in what was already a stressful situation for them. Did I feel bad? Maybe a tiny bit, but I reminded myself that none of that excused their entitled behavior. They could have just asked nicely to use my spot temporarily given their circumstances, instead of repeatedly taking it and then escalating to vandalism and fake notices when called out. Anyway, about a month after learning this, I got an unexpected letter from a law firm representing my former neighbors. They were threatening to sue me for emotional distress and property value depreciation caused by my dumpster. According to their claim, my spite dumpster had delayed the sale of their house and forced them to accept a lower offer than they would have otherwise received. I immediately called the lawyer who had helped me before. He read through the letter and laughed. "This is ridiculous," he said. "First off, they'd have to prove the dumpster actually affected their property value, which would be nearly impossible since it was legally placed in your parking spot. Second, they'd have to prove you acted maliciously with the specific intent of causing them harm, which contradicts their own documented behavior of repeatedly using your parking spot without permission. So what should I do?" I asked. "Let me draft a response," he said. "We'll remind them of their documented harassment, the police reports, and the fake city notice. That should put an end to this nonsense." He sent a strongly worded letter back to their lawyer, essentially calling their bluff and warning that any lawsuit would be met with a countersuit for harassment, vandalism, and fraudulent impersonation of city officials, the last of which could potentially involve criminal charges we had previously declined to pursue. We didn't hear back from them for a few weeks, and I figured that was the end of it. Then one day, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was the husband. "Look," he said, sounding defeated, "we can't afford to fight this in court. Our lawyer says we don't have a case, but that dumpster cost us a lot of money." "How's that?" I asked, genuinely curious. "We had to lower our asking price twice because potential buyers kept asking about the eyesore next door. We ended up selling for $20,000 less than we wanted." "That's rough," I said, not feeling too sympathetic given his past behavior. "But I'm not sure what you expect me to do about it now." "I'm not asking for money," he clarified. "I just wanted you to know that your petty revenge had real consequences for my family. We're struggling to get back on our feet." I thought about it for a moment. "Your repeated theft of my parking spot had real consequences for me too. I asked you nicely to stop dozens of times before I took action. All of this could have been avoided if you just respected my property from the beginning." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Yeah, I know," he finally admitted. "I was a jerk about it. I thought since you only had one car and we had two, you should just let us use your spot. It seemed stupid that it would sit empty most of the day." "You could have just asked," I pointed out, "instead of assuming you were entitled to it." "You're right," he said, which shocked me. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. This whole thing got way out of hand." I appreciated the apology, but I wasn't completely ready to let him off the hook. "What about the vandalism and the fake city notice?" "That went beyond just parking in my spot." "That was wrong," he admitted. "I was angry and not thinking clearly. The job loss hit me hard, and I was taking it out on you. Not an excuse, just the truth. I decided to be the bigger person. I accept your apology. I hope things get better for you guys." "Thanks," he said. "For what it's worth, I learned my lesson about entitled behavior. Hard way to learn it, but I guess I needed to." After we hung up, I felt like a chapter had finally closed on the whole ordeal. The guy had been a jerk, but at least he ultimately owned up to it. That counts for something. As for the dumpster, I decided to put it to good use. I cleaned it up, sealed it properly, and with the help of my buddy Mike and a few other friends, we turned it into a raised garden bed in my backyard. We filled it with soil and planted vegetables, tomatoes, peppers, zucchini, you name it. My wife, who had been skeptical about the whole dumpster saga, ended up loving our revenge garden, as we jokingly call it. The HOA wasn't thrilled about my creative gardening solution at first, but when I pointed out there was nothing in the bylaws prohibiting repurposed containers as garden beds, I checked thoroughly this time. They grudgingly dropped the issue. Several neighbors actually thought it was pretty clever and asked for tips on their own gardens. Dan and his family have become good friends. We have cookouts using vegetables from the dumpster garden, and we laugh about how the whole situation unfolded. I even let them use my parking spot occasionally when they have guests over, because they ask nicely, and that's what good neighbors do. The entitled former neighbors still live with the in-laws as far as I know. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that the husband eventually found another job, but not before they had to declare bankruptcy due to the financial strain of the two-mortgage situation. I don't wish them ill, but I can't say I'm shedding any tears either. Sometimes I think about selling the dumpster now that it's served its purpose, but I've grown attached to it. It stands as a reminder that standing up for yourself doesn't always have to be about confrontation. Sometimes it's about creative problem solving and holding your ground when someone tries to take advantage of you. So that's the update on the Great Dumpster Revenge Saga. The entitled neighbors learned an expensive lesson about respecting other people's property. I got a productive garden out of the deal, and my parking spot remains blissfully unoccupied unless I say otherwise. And for those wondering, no, I never paid a single cent for that graffiti cleanup. Some lessons cost more than a can of spray paint to learn. The next one is entitled People Story. I dated him for a year, until he, unexpectedly, broke up with me last September. We've been good friends for years and we still remained friends afterwards. Unexpectedly, I learned he committed suicide last month. He OD'd on a strong sedative and lost his life. I was in total shock, gutted and devastated. Everyone who knew him were just as shocked. Sadly, in hindsight, I could now tell something was wrong. He exhibited some signs of unhappiness. I have been mourning his tragic death for the past month. I contacted his family to return some of his belongings. The family now tell me that he wrote 2 notes before he died, one directly addressed to me. They are refusing to give me the letter for no apparent reason. They're just asking me to respect their emotions, which I genuinely do. I am grieving as much as they are. I don't know if there's a protocol here, but it seems to me they're going against his wishes. I want to give them their space to mourn, but I genuinely need that note. What do I do? Edit. I want to clarify this. I asked them specifically if it's a bad note about me and my behavior. They said it's nothing like that at all and I shouldn't think that way. Update: a while ago I wrote this post and asked for advice. I got to read the note and it opened more problems than it solved. I was approached by his older sister who was okay giving me the letter. Before he died, he apparently wanted to see me but wasn't conscious enough when he asked. His sister says there is something she too doesn't know about, but speculates that they just thought he wanted to change his mind. I sat down and read it yesterday. It is awfully heartbreaking. He said he was sorry but he couldn't find a way to tolerate life. He said he always felt like he's not in the right place, and was mentally induced to feel blue. He wrote about his mental health, saying he was sure I'd understand. Contrary to my worries, he said I was something exceptional in his life. He apologized again and, at the end, included names of 2 friends he'd made whom he wanted to help. He wants me to call for a wellness check on them, which I did today. I'm thankful he is not remembering me badly, quite the opposite. But it still hurts so badly. I can't stop crying. Every moment, I get this feeling that my heart was penetrated by something. He was unhappy, but he was always so quiet about it. It says much about me, that I should have picked up those clues. He suppressed things too deep, unfortunately. I feel tragically sad. I genuinely miss him. I'm still not sure why his parents hid it and their reasoning to think he was changing his mind. Even his sister doesn't know and is questioning it. I will leave it, as I know how devastated they are. I guess I'll just stay curious forever. Are you hungry for more slices of stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss out on any videos. See you tomorrow at Story Slices.